So this is the Data Dictionary Workgroup Lite. We're not going to vote on anything. You're going to find out how we vote on things now. And we're going to just basically go into what we're looking going forward, what we're doing today, how we're transitioning into a different tomorrow for how the dictionary workgroup operates. So there's my info if you want to get in touch with me. And the first thing I want to cover is the expansion of the leadership. So with Kevin heading out, he retired. I understand he's doing well. But I started thinking, what do we want to do with the vice chair? And I think it was Sam and I were having a conversation about it, and it was like, there isn't any rule that you only have one. And I really wanted to get a diversity of experience and backgrounds. Even though there's a fair amount of overlap, but I wanted to expand the group that would be getting together to work on the vision and work on making sure the work group was facilitated and made it easier for you all who would come to the meetings to understand what we're putting out there, right? To make sure that the topics that have come in the door were properly addressed and formatted and ready for you. And that we could have this group to where we'd get together before the meetings and have a huddle and really work on bringing things along these lines of the ideas of vision and process and policy back to the group for you all, so that you could have an easier time of engaging. Gayle, as you may know, who will be coming up here, is directly out of what I call the originators, and MLS is an originator. And then Al comes out of the world where I call them distributors. I mean, they pull data in, they send data out, but it's a little bit different world. And there's definitely overlap. But the third is essentially the consumer. And that is an open position. Consumers, for the most part, are going to tend to be brokers, going to be technology providers. So if you're on the receiving end and you're frustrated and you're willing to put in the hours, we'd definitely like to hear from you. So you can just email into dd@reso.org. That is the one-stop shop for really anything. You can certainly reach out to us individually, but if you shoot an email to that, you'll get a collective where it's myself, Jason, I believe Josh is on that. I think Greg sees that. Al and Gayle, I don't know if you know, but I plan on putting you on the end of that as well. So you've got a group there at one email address. So that's really where we recommend you go to. All right, so do I have a volunteer? Just kidding. But please do consider it, especially if you feel that you've got an opinion and a lot to add, and you also like herding cats. So it's definitely one of those where you're going to be doing more administrative. We're not looking to get somebody up to further their agenda, but to further everybody's agenda. All right, speaking of agendas, I'm going to cover a few different things today, and then we're actually going to do a shift and have Gayle come up to talk about her subgroup. But I wanted to go a little bit over the vision, which I'll jump right into. So one thing we know is we've got kind of a constraint. It tends to be property related, right? We've got people around that, and we've got different functions around that, like showing and so on, but we tend to center around property. But what we've been doing more and more is investing in, you'll see in some of the subgroups, in related industries, right? Segments of our industry that maybe need a little bit of work. And obviously, we've been looking beyond our borders, beyond North America. We've classically been US and Canada, but going beyond that is definitely part of the vision that you actually see happening, so you see actual work being done on that front. And All the while, as we're evolving this, I think one of the most important things for us to remember is that we need to manage this evolution. You know, some of the lessons I learned early on going out looking at other standards that I didn't want us to do, and I think we've been pretty successful, is not being a place where you just throw everything in. If you got 5 answers for one problem, it can be those 5 standardized answers for one thing, but then which one is somebody using, right? That predictability, that stability, the old thing that leadership at RESO had, they want plug and play out of this, right? So if we don't manage our evolution, then we can easily wind up being like too much. Trying to represent too much can wind up being confusing and counterproductive. So you'll see that's a common thread that we have throughout. And I think the main thing is we might say, hey, well, we're going to facilitate making it easy to plug into this. We're going to make stuff plug and play, right? But to me, it's really better stated that we are keeping our sight on lowering the number of errors and lowering the cost. And I think that's just another way of saying it, but to me, I think that's where the focus should always reside. And we should always be asking ourselves, are we doing these two things, right? And not listed here, but always a consideration is when it comes to innovation, I think it's important for us to be careful that we don't stifle it too much. I remember I was at a conference where there was a bunch of people in a sit-down having a conversation, and they were passing the mic around, and I threw out the, yeah, but we got to be careful we don't stifle innovation with standards. And it was kind of struck me because it was, the reaction I got was almost like I was surprised that I said that. And, you know, we've got to create our standards if we want to meet this vision that we have of lowering costs. But at the same time, if we get too rigid, then are we going to prevent something from happening that would really make things better for all of us, that might lower errors and costs? So I think it's an important thing that we keep that sort of, you know, call the lower costs and errors as our North Star. Well, you know, adjacent to Polaris is, what is that? The Pleiades, right? We have to have a vision that's a little bit broader, and we have to look at those things and make sure that we're balanced. I think is really important. Okay, to talk about the industries, just to get your thoughts going, and I'd love to hear some comments. And this is not all-inclusive, like rental. You just heard conversations about it. It's not on the list, although you could say, okay, that's property and listing, but you know, I tried to create something to get us thinking about things like sort of in the order that you have property. Well, that property gets developed, and then it gets, you know, usually a county or some authority registers it, right? So you've got the data that the developers have, you've got the data that the counties have, and we all kind of know those, that tax data, as we commonly call it. And we take that and we turn it into a listing. This is all very MLS up to this point, right, with the listing. And the brokerages, though, they really have got so much more data. And where are we at with that, right? I think keeping that in focus and making sure that we've got people saying, hey, I've got something to say on that. And we either have a topic on the board or we have a subgroup to help further those things. And I would love it, you know, we all know appraisal, we know lending. There's all these things that are adjacent to properties. We've got companies that are coming up with all sorts of, like, I loved when I first heard the word psychographic data, right? Well, these are all forms of data. Is there something that we can do to facilitate these standards? All the conversation about AI and the methodologies we have to feed our data into those mechanisms, to language models and to control them, or to throw it into some free model and get all sorts of bad advice. You know, what structures, what things about the dictionary do we need to do on those fronts? So these are the things that I think it's important for us. And if you have a passion for, we're looking for you, right? We've got different tiers. You don't have to be the chair. You don't have to be the vice chair. You can run a subgroup. You can even just champion a thought by putting up a post in the dictionary work group. Okay, so before I get into that process, wanted to cover policy. But if I may, let me go back, because you know how I love it when I get everybody talking here. And that's one thing I'm bummed about not having a vote, because you'd usually get in an argument and it would be quite entertaining. But with regards to some of the things I have listed here, what ideas, what thoughts? Any other segments, any other functions that you think we're lacking? And Jason's ready to take notes. We'd love to have some feedback. Commercial, absolutely. You know, and in all honesty, we've got 2 iterations of that occurred, and we really need to circle back again. I think that's a very tough animal. The second iteration was very commercial focused as far as the commercial industry, but I really feel we kind of scratched the surface on that, and that work is something that could be involved. So if you're volunteering, we'd love to have that topic come back. And that's a good example of something that you need a subgroup for, as opposed to just a post. So any other thoughts? Wow, tough crowd. All right, I'll go ahead and move along here. All right, so policy. You've probably heard this one spoken from this stage for at least a year and a half, couple of years, is the realization that where we started off, which was a consensus, all the way through 1.7 was purely consensus. We tried to, you know, force convention on things, but it was really like, let's get it loaded, right? Let's get this dictionary loaded. And then the shift of taking more time and also taking more liberty, like at the staff level and as the chair, of saying, you know what, yeah, we've got this stuff that the work group worked on, but the convention really isn't quite there. And we started pushing more and more, and that has been accelerating. And that remains a very in focus policy of ours right now, is that we need to maintain convention. It's not enough to say we all do this, but we all might need to change in order for the dictionary to be cohesive and make sense in itself. And that's where that comes from. Representation over invention. So I talked about innovation suffering, and this is one of the reasons why we need to be careful, is because if we just do nothing but innovate and make up a bunch of stuff that nobody's using, then we're still going to have a lot of stuff that nobody uses, even if a couple of them are great. And it's not that we aren't going to innovate. It isn't that we're going to not add things that we don't commonly have. When you get into one of the agenda items we have is adding a green company. They do testing on homes, right? And we've got a list of those types of organizations like HERS and HES and LEAD and so on. That was kind of innovation. Nobody really had it, but we had the minimum requirement that we needed an adoption from a couple organizations at minimum. And we've very much taken that idea that if it's not there, it's a goner when it comes to the people who are getting tested, the systems. So if we've got stuff in the dictionary that nobody's using, it's a deprecation candidate, like right away. You would see it come up for vote. And we've kind of gotten through most of the obvious cases there. And now we're starting to come up with deprecations for other reasons, which you'll see we've got one coming up. So we still need to represent. We got a minimum of 2 implementations, but don't be bashful if you've invented the great new mousetrap. All you gotta do is promise to do it yourself and get it done within a reasonable amount of time. And 2, talk somebody else into it. And then you'll have time. It'll be in the standard, and it can blossom, right? But we do have that to keep us from over-innovating. And hopefully that's a pretty good balance, the mechanism we have. If you've got any thoughts about that policy and how we're doing it, please speak up. We'd be more than happy to make a topic out of it. You can post on the wiki or post on the forum, or you can just have conversations with us around that front. Extensibility and admissibility. We've now got this added into our actual policy document, which, by the way, if you go to Confluence, the Atlassian, and you go to the data dictionary page and you scroll down, there's a couple links for policies, and one of them is the data dictionary policies document. And that's been evolving over time, and that's really a good one to take a look at. And I would love it if we get people with eyes on that and start giving us feedback and coming up with things that might be useful to add to that. The new group of chair, vice chairs is definitely going to be doing a lot of work on policy document, evolving that. So the idea with extensibility and admissibility goes back to this phrase that you probably heard, it's if you do it and the dictionary does it, then you must do it the dictionary way. And then you ask yourself, wow, that says a lot about, that doesn't say a lot about different angles of that. So far, that phrase has not been proven untrue. So it basically means if the dictionary's not doing it, you can go ahead and do it all day long. And conversely, if the dictionary is doing it, but you're not, don't do it. And that's the omissibility part of it, which that is actually a word, I checked. So an important aspect of engaging, and I'll talk about that again on a short segment on implementation here. One thing that really Josh was bringing forward really got me, more present-minded on it. I've known about standards. I've been involved in standards, IEEE personally, and so on. But leveraging those for things, it's now like a matter of policy. If there's an existing standard, and unless it's got a real problem, we're going to use that. So before you start creating a big list of states or something like that, we keep in mind that that work might already be done, and you might bring forward something that actually just gets replaced. So if you do a little research on that front, and you bring it forward as just simply, here's an existing standard, getting it voted in, I think, will be a lot quicker and easier, because we're definitely promoting, and that's why I'm talking about this. We want to use existing standards, and if they got a problem, maybe we get involved and help shape it towards what we need. Leveraging R&D, there's a nuance. Somebody has a field, they say to Fast Track, hey, I got this field, why do I have a problem with it? And Fast Track looks, and there's 30 others that have it. We don't need R&D to research that, because we've kind of got our answer. Here's something that's out there, it's being used by a lot, that's really straightforward, right? You don't like a definition, you want to make some suggestions. We don't need R&D. But R&D, it's very important that if we have something that we're not sure about, that we know that it needs to be researched, that there's a need for subject matter experts, that we're going to be very strong about that notion that, hey, this isn't obvious, this needs to go back to that group, right? And in the past, there's situations where something comes up, and even commercial as an example, well, we'll go grab commercial people and we'll go at it, right? We want to make sure that that initial R&D, that they take a look at it from a broader, higher altitude, look at needs, do those types of assessments, that happens. And then subgroups, you see more and more, we keep accelerating, and I'll talk a bit more about those. So big old change for us, and we've still got some decisions to make, is around that fact that our versions used to be whatever the next number was. And we had kind of settled on a cadence. It's like, okay, once a year, because we got to where we were doing it every 6 months, and it was like, whoa, slow down. And so it was like, okay, then we decide once a year, and then we had like a several-year gap between versions from like 1.7 to 2.0. There was a lot of retooling of things now. Well, where we're at now is we're literally using those numbers appropriately. So when you see that first number change, that's a major. When you see that second digit after the decimal, that's a minor. And then that third place is a patch. And I've got a little bit to explain what this means for the dictionary. So first of all, as far as like the policy aspect of it, is that first digit. So when we go from 2 to 3, that's a big deal. And I'm going to talk about the cadence, but it's one of those where it goes all the way up, just like we've been doing before. It goes to the board of directors, they ratify it, and then we move forward with it. But what we now have is a tool to do these minor changes. And so for these minor changes, so we can be more nimble, which is meeting a demand that we've had, is that we will approve these at the workgroup level. Now they'll eventually make it to the board in the major release, so it'll still get ratified. But what we've done is just made the organization a bit more nimble for certain types of changes. And I'll go over the differences between those. And then this patch is something that we've been patching current versions, past versions, but these patches tend to be something like the definition didn't have punctuation correctly. We'd even be kind of careful about having a really big meaning change in a definition, but these are things that like certification testing aren't looking at, right? And so these are these quick changes that generally the process in the past would be, like we talk about doing something, I'd have a chat with the CEO. So Sam and I have had several of these chats, and it's like, okay, we're cool. We just go ahead and make that quick fix. Well, now we've got it to where instead of it just being an update without a version change, now we've got something to give you an indicator so that you can see, oh, something minor has happened. And again, those will tend to be very nimble and should be of a low order of impact. All right, so the breaking changes, that kind of answers everything, is getting used to what these are. Maybe not as intuitive as you think, because remember, we're talking from the perspective of the dictionary, right? We're not talking from the perspective of your implementation. And we have to draw the line somewhere. I could literally have a minor change in the dictionary that would be a major change for me. It just depends on what it is. See if I can come up with an example for you, but say I've got an enumeration, right? For jealousy windows were mentioned earlier, and somebody adds louver, right, into the dictionary. Now all of a sudden I've got a conflict. For the dictionary, it didn't have jealousy. It was just a straightforward, simple addition to an enumeration, no problem. But now, in Spirit, even without a synonym, I'm not compliant. So that means I actually have to do something about it. And now I'm modifying an enumeration, which I think most of you would agree, that's kind of a breaking thing. You can't just simply modify it and have all your connected systems work. So this idea of what is major and minor is very focused around the dictionary itself. And we've drawn some lines. We've got a pretty robust document that's written up. It applies to transport as well, so it's quite unified. And I invite you to go take a look at that. I think it's an important thing to understand what's breaking for you and what's breaking for the dictionary. So if we change the name or the type in the dictionary, we're calling that breaking at the dictionary level. If we do a replacement, which is generally a deprecation, and right now we might deprecate something and it's considered a bit softer. Right now, deprecations are breaking changes. But in particular, the discussions around if we're going to take something out and replace it with something, that's just renaming it, right? So that is very clear for us. If we've got, you know how the enumerations can be open or closed? So you can have an open enumeration, open without enumerations, you can have open with enumerations, or you can have closed with enumerations. And what that means is the closed is that pick list that you can't add to, right? So we've only got a few of them. Standard status, that is closed. It's locked, it's done. Don't mess with that. Well, we've got MLS status, so go ahead and mess with that. And there's some rules about how you tie those two together, and I'm always happy to talk to you about that. But that gives you an example. If we close something, that's all of a sudden creating a constraint that we feel should fall up to the level of breaking change. Synonyms, we recognize that if I take a synonym and throw it on a field, for you, you might have had that synonym and it wasn't a problem because the certification wasn't connecting those two dots, and now all of a sudden we drop it in there, and boom, you're failing overnight, right? So we've made those additions of synonyms a major change. And then testing rules, and the nuance with the testing rules is, yes, if we add something new, then we're gonna have new testing rules, and that something new might not be a breaking change, and thus the new testing rules won't be a breaking change. But if we throw new testing rules at something that's existing in particular, we're saying that's always going to be a breaking change. So this is a big mishmash. There's a lot more to read on it. What questions, what thoughts do you have on this? This is a plane in flight, and some might argue that we're still working on it, others might not. I think this is going to continue to get modified and evolved, and I think your engagement and your perspective of what's breaking at the dictionary and breaking back home on your project might be different. Yeah, there I shouted. I guess I don't need to shout. No, that's okay.
Some of the breaking changes, like once they're approved and we know they're coming down the pike and all that, they are contrary to what's in, something that's a field now is like a whole resource in a new version or something like that. But work on the new whatever kind of can't begin until there's ratification. So we're either starting the work before it's official and breaking something now for certification on, version whatever that's out, or we're waiting and then getting behind. Because like some of this stuff takes like a significant amount of time and effort to be able to work with. So yeah. As these versions are rolling around and there are these breaking changes, how do you envision that process of like catching up to or getting ahead of whatever?
I'll just say it's a factor of risk taking, right? I think this would be a great session. Just to sit and talk about how you can game the machine. It's not really gaming it, it's a bad word. It's really how you can take risks. And it's all about understanding what you're doing, of course, whether or not it's breaking, and those fundamentals. But then, what is testing doing? Like if testing is real time all the time versus a single event, that's a factor. What you're doing to your data clients, the risk you're taking to be non-compliant, to do something early that's a breaking change. I think that would be a really interesting conversation because it depends on kind of what it is. The bottom line is, though, is if there's a version that's not being tested yet and you do a breaking change, depending on what that is, it might very much trigger off a certification failure event. And you want to be really lucid about that. Now, you might have some strategy that really stretches the balloon, but I think, being careful about that. Because, I'm empathetic. I get in those situations where the committee's like, you want to do what? And it's like, oh, crud. So and then what if they got some sort of really strong reason, like some legal challenge or some state ordinance that's just been passed, you know? So it's not a simple answer, right? And I think at the end of the day, sometimes businesses need to take risks. I'm not like endorsing ad nauseum, passing your certification and then modifying everything to where you're certified, but you're really not. Just be forewarned. Been having a lot of discussion about continual testing. So it's very nuanced. I think that's a great, I would love to have a session and a conversation around that. Any other discussion or thoughts around breaking changes, minor patches?
Are these breaking changes still going to be happening annually?
No. I am getting to timing. Thank you for the segue. There you go. All right, here's what we're envisioning, and I actually put a post out earlier for the work group to talk about this, and we could certainly discuss today. And I don't know if the work group is going to wind up being rigid or dynamic. We need to talk about that, and we need to think about it. So right now, the notion that we have with breaking changes is they're going to be less frequent. So is that every 2 years? I don't know. I wouldn't want to be overly rigid because we might all decide that we need to do this sooner. And we all might decide that, you know, well, it's been 2 years, but there's really not enough in there to go through it, and nobody's really clamoring to get those changes deployed. So I don't want to be insensitive to dynamics and needs, but if we don't set a cadence, we might meander forever as well. So I've got a post out there for us to talk about it. Right now, I feel we should have that same for major. We should have the same 6-month comment period, right? Then it gets ratified, and then you've got a year to implement. So you've kind of got 18 months from the point where it starts to become stable, right? And to it gets ratified, and then you go to work on it because you know it's going to be in that version. Things could always change again in later major versions, but if you also know that a major version isn't happening every year, but is maybe more like every couple of years. But I think we're going to learn some lessons about ourselves in that timing. Minor, the demand is very nimble. It's like we want to be nimble on this. And minors are kind of funny too, because with the certification, I think I've got it on another slide, but I'll mention it now that, you know, you can be certified on a major and then minor stuff can come along, and it's almost like you can ignore it, you know. Testing will recognize that you're doing it, but it's got a certain, because it's non-breaking as far as the dictionary is concerned, it's got a certain looseness, gives you a liberty to do things. So we'll see how that pans out, but I think like quarterly, or at least every, you know, twice a year would make sense. And immediately had some conversations and concerned about the comment period. Because we're becoming so nimble, right? Do we wind up having too short of comment periods and then we don't recognize that, oh, we really didn't get that right? And then now we're gonna take this minor change and fix it, which becomes a major change, right? Most of the time when you go correct something that you messed up, it becomes a major change, because we'd be doing some, like, say we put out an enumeration and it turns out that, you know, it's the wrong word, right? Now we've got to fix that, and to change it to the right word, whatever it is, doesn't matter, to change it, it becomes major. So I almost foresee us doing like a leapfrog. So for 3 months, things are out for comment, and at the same time, we're collecting the next minor, you know, and then that goes for comment, and then we collect. So could we wind up with this quarterly cycle where during any quarter, there's some stuff that's out for comment and some stuff that's being added to the next version? Maybe. But check out the post. Definitely would love to get some comments and discussion going around that. And then patch, you know, right now it's loose, but you might be starting to invest yourself in definitions, right? You might even be doing something automated. You got some language model reading it and then automatically doing something for you and stuff like that. So I don't want to be insensitive to these. And I think it's worth it for everybody to take a look, right? So what's going on with these patches? What patch changes have we had? How do they affect me, right? Hopefully it should be a very low order of effect. All right. Any questions on these? All right. Okay, so where are we at with releases? This also kind of illustrates what I'm talking about with major and minors, how they can progress. So 1.7, it's not being tested. I think we're getting to a point where you have to have 2.0, or we might have passed that point. So sayonara to 1.7. 2.0 is being actively certified, but 2.1 has been finalized by us. It's over with certification. As soon as they're ready to start testing, that's going to start rolling. Note that 2.1 is kind of in this transition, going from our old versioning into major minor patch. So don't expect that to be completely minor in itself. I'd have to go through and look at everything that's in there, which you can. And if you go out to the wiki, you can take a look. Or not the wiki, in Confluence, we've got the 2.1. Matter of fact, all the stuff that's coming, you can go in and find those there. Very handy, including 2.2, which we're collecting minor changes for 2.2, and we're collecting major changes for 3.0, all at the same time. So in theory, 2.2 is going to come out beforehand. If 3.0 was ready to go and 2.2 wasn't out, 2.2 would go right along with it. So it's that major change sort of collects everything before it and takes it out. I don't think we'll have that timing concern, but in case it popped in your head. All right, so that's where we're at. Okay, process. Participating in the dictionary. In the past, I've done where I pull it up and show you where to go and all that. I'm not going to do that today. Just really want to kind of highlight some aspects. One is doing your research up front. So that's not only looking at the wiki, but that's also talking to your peers, rallying support for your idea in advance, getting that feedback. You don't have to wait for the work group to start interacting on this. And definitely looking if something's already there. You're basically saving Jason time. And if you've seen the look on his face, it's really sad when he sat and worked on something that was like totally already there. Don't do that to Jason. But do that homework and then get your post out there. You've still got the same. Who's made a post? All right, we need to up that. If you're not making a post, you do know you can make a post and it can be totally stupid, and yeah, somebody's going to laugh at you, but it's fine. There's no penalty. You won't be uninvited from cocktail hour at RESO's. But getting in and participating in those posts, we really intentionally do not have a whole lot of rules there. Now, one of the newer ones that we're asking is, tell us if you deliberately that you want this on the agenda. You don't have to. We read them and we understand, but we are starting to move towards where we want to see that request, right? So if you want it, if it's just asking a question and having a conversation, that's fine. You can use it for that. But do tell us, and then you'll see if you go into Confluence today, you'll see how we've got flags on there, like if something's active, where it's at. We've got these items that you post, they go into different buckets. So has something gone through the work group and been approved? You can see those paper trails in there. So then we have the discussion at the work group. At the work group, if you've been to the most recent meetings, we do a motion and a second, and then we don't vote. And we intentionally wanted to move to a different method. And if you simply look at the numbers at a meeting, you'd see like 60 people at the meeting and like 35 of them would vote on something, right? And that was kind of the norm. But now with the virtual, the numbers are less, but also we're not sitting there with a captive audience asking you to raise your hand. And I think that the modest reduction in numbers, I think the votes that we do have a higher value, have a lot more thought, and are a lot more inclusive. You couldn't make the meeting, you can still make the vote. You can still research, there will be a discussion on the dictionary forum. You can still engage during that period. And then after we get done with the vote, then we figure out, what version, which then in turn talks about what the release timing might look like. So with regards to the voting, this has been something we've been nailing down. So the 20-day window might be kind of new to you. It's not that old. So when we get that motion in second, and then it goes very quickly out to the voting platform, notifications go out if you're following the group, and we've got a 20-day window. And that gives us time to kind of get that wrapped up because we're on a 30-day cycle with the dictionary work group. And there's some of the benefits that I think I mentioned. All right, so implementation, really quick. If you got any questions about these, talk to somebody. Some of the biggest mistakes I've seen is taking the dictionary and turning it into your input form. Just doing it, right? That notion of native is a real thing, and it's got a lot of value to it. But if you just take the dictionary, and it wasn't made to be an input form. It was made for that transport, for that handoff. That's what the dictionary is made for. And you hear a lot of people say, yeah, but that's implementation. And that may seem dismissive. It's really not. It's the notion that implementation has got an insane amount of dynamics to it. And it really depends on what you're doing. So as you're implementing, keep in mind the omissibility and extensibility. A lot of people drop notions because they're not in the dictionary. A lot of people add fields and lookups because they are. Don't do that. Hold true to what your area needs, right? And then take a look at what native is and how it can benefit you. But definitely take the time to have those conversations if you're not clear. All right, I am going to, in 2 minutes, skate over what you'll be seeing on the agenda at the next work group meeting. Most of these should be there. All right, so, and this is kind of a preview of what we do in the work group without a vote. We can certainly have some conversation on these, but this one really straightforward. I'm going to add an item, a pick list item into current financing. I can tell you right now that looks pretty much like it's going to be a minor change unless we find a synonym floating around somewhere or something that it collides with. And you can see that we've got 4 organizations who are using 3 different systems that currently have this. So it meets the sniff test. So it's good to go. We can add it. And also at the same time, there is a connection between current financing, buyer financing, and some of the listing terms. So we're automatically bringing those to the group to say, hey, by the way, don't forget these. Ceiling height already exists, but it's a commercial notion. And so we've got some folks that are talking about this for their residential, talking about this for room by room. So think about it. Does it have value to you? If we've got a few that love it and many that don't because of omissibility, that's actually okay. But do we need to standardize this is really a good question beyond commercial and into the residential world. This one is huge. If you're using numbers, I'll start with the bottom bullet point. If you're using integers for your streets and your members are used to sorting and searching, right, by ranges, you're going to have to handle this in your implementation. And you can parse a string, figure out what's numbers. You might want to have some rules on your input, But at the end of the day, when it comes to the handoff and the transport, having these two fields does cause a lot of pain. So that's why this one is on the table. When you come forward to talk about this one, you might get challenged on your implementation versus us changing the standard here. Personally, I'm very mixed on this. I've got mixed feelings on it. But this would be a good one for you to show up and have that conversation with the group, because I think there's going to be a lot of folks that are going to have to make some changes. Our green rating systems that we have out there, we've got one. They used to be one state only, and we omitted those back in the day. Now we've got a couple new things that are coming up. One, we've got the energy performance that's already on the table, and figured, well, since we're making some additions, that I'd throw this one out there as well. So there's a post on this. It's just a straight addition, minor change. Okay, this is another one that might have some impact. Do you live in the world of full partial? How many are full partials? All right, how many are full, three-quarter, half, give or take quarter? Okay, so that kind of bodes towards the recommendations that we have here. It's a combination of major and minor. So I think the definitions being, up to the level of minor changes, because our definition really changes like what this field is and how you'd use it. It's going to suggest that you stop using partial and use half. So that's where that, thing about definitions crosses that line. And I know it's somewhat subjective, but when it comes to definitions, I think we're going to have more of that down the road. All right, and then we've got some new lookup, fast track. They're cranking out a lot of work. So we got 44 lookups across 13 fields that are coming from them. It's a lot for us to go through. And then to touch on the subgroups really quick. So they need to be specific goals. They do require time, thus multiple meetings. And we want SMEs there at these meetings. It's really important. And they basically don't make decisions, they create proposals. And subgroups come to an end. They do their job and they're gone. And if we need them again later, we'll pull them back together. Bulk sale is another one that has finished and they're all done. If we need more on that front, we can certainly bring them back together. ADUs, which wound up being additional living quarters to keep it not as a particular type of additional living quarter. That's a value that's in the schema they put together. And then we've got new construction, so the builders. This is one that's going on now. So if you play in that world, if you're a subject matter expert, we really want you. If you're your average MLS, sure, you can come. But if you could find a builder and bring them along with you, we'd like it much, much more. And then the global subgroup, which you've even heard about today, that's an ongoing question. So I am going to move on. Sorry, Gayle, you've got even a shorter amount of time because I think I got to meandering a bit. But I'm going to hand this off to Gayle to talk about her subgroup, the deduplication or duplication work group. And here you go. All right,
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm here to talk very quickly about data duplication and the subgroup work that we've done so far. So here we go. So what have we done so far? What is the purpose of this subgroup? Our intention is to review the data elements that have been identified as possible duplicates and determine, are they really duplicates? So to do that, we've come up with kind of a system for assigning different types of duplication and making recommendations to Data Dictionary about what to do about these duplicates when they come up. So those may include deprecation. They may also just be as simple as a definition update. So with that, let me talk a little bit about how we've done this. We've established a framework for identifying those different duplicates. And like I said, we make those recommendations, and we're doing it in a data-driven format. That's how we make these decisions. So let me give you an example. We look at the individual, I call them sets of duplicates. And we also look at what property types they're associated with, the number of organizations, the number of systems, how many are using which kind, and all of these factors become a part of our decision-making process about what to do with these duplicates that we've encountered in the standard. So the first kind of duplicate is what we call a bidirectional duplicate. These duplicates are complete redundancy. They say the exact same thing in the exact same way in two different places. So, for example, the gray water system, it's in both exterior features and lot features. You don't need it in both. It is a duplicate, and this is what I think of when I think of bidirectional duplicates. So one-directional duplicates, the best example I could come up with is every square is a rectangle, but not every rectangle is a square. So, for example, golf course, you find it in the frontage type field. You also find it in the RESO standard lot features field. And, you know, a golf course might be adjacent to a lot, but it may not be on the frontage of the lot. So that's why there's a little bit of nuance there that is being communicated, and you got to figure out what to do with it. So with that, we move on to intentional or planned duplicates. With these, they may seem identical, but there's very, very important nuance that needs to be retained when you take it from one field to another. So for example, we have in the other structures field, we have barns. In the horse amenity field, we have barn, very similar. At first glance, you think, oh, those are duplicates. Great, we can get rid of one. But a barn that is suitable for a horse is not necessarily the same as just a, I don't know, I don't deal with farms all that much, but a regular barn. There's a distinction, and we want to make sure that we keep important nuance that we're communicating, and we're not diluting the standard. So again, intentional duplicates, but there's nuance that needs to be retained. So, I mean, the nuance on the different Batmans just screams to me. Lastly, there's the kind of duplicates that we determine are not duplicates. These items may have the same words, but they do not convey the same information at all. So an example was other equipment generator and accessibility features, standby generator. So there's a difference between having a generator that's kind of at a property, and in case the power goes out, yeah, it'll kick on, it'll help you out, great. And there's a difference between that and accessibility, a standby generator, that your life depends on whether or not that thing kicks on. And so anyway, all of that to say, they are not duplicates. Not at all. So we resolve these different kinds of duplicates through different solutions. One of them is to deprecate, like Rob had spoken about, with major changes that come after a specified period of time. It's not happening this year. Or, you know, sometimes we add notes to an enumeration, their definitions, to communicate about the nuance we are trying to convey with keeping multiple words that appear to be duplicates. And then sometimes we make no changes. So, all that to say, how far are we? We started and we had, we created our system first for how we were going to evaluate these items, and that took a couple meetings, but after that we really accelerated. So we've completed 28 sets of duplicates so far, and those recommendations have been made to Data Dictionary Workgroup, and we're going to work through getting those on agendas and getting them processed through the Data Dictionary. And we have 32 sets that remain. So with that, that's my update on the duplication subgroup.